the Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Hello and welcome to the Best in the World with Richard Parr. This week I speak to the reigning pole vault Olympic champion Katerina Stefanidi. I really enjoyed this conversation with the Greek athlete. She's definitely a fun person. You can tell that in the conversation. Really upbeat, really light. And I think what I like about this chat with Katerina is that she's someone who is just confident in what she's doing, you know. The way she talks about being a successful pole vaulter at an early age and how that's kind of set her up for life. And talking about being a well-rounded person, and we talk about how she studied psychology at Stanford and then also went on to ASU in Arizona. We cover a whole load of different things in this conversation with Katerina. We also talk about her success at the Rio Olympics, how the Athens Games helped inspire her just a little bit more to become an athlete in pole vault. We also talk about her family, and we talk about the relationship with her husband, who is also her coach. We definitely learn a lot from Katerina on this week's program. Plus, we look ahead to the World Championships in London and her confidence of performing well at that event. All of that is on today's Best in the World with Richard Parr. Just before we get to the conversation, I want to say about Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. They've got over 180,000 titles for you to choose from. I've got a few books which I've got lined up that I want to listen to soon. I've got 10% Happier by Dan Harris, The Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters, Bad Science by Ben Goldacre, and The Artist, Being Iniesta by Andreas Iniesta. I'm going to be listening to all of them. They're locked and loaded, and I'm getting ready to learn. And you know what? You could have the opportunity of learning from these amazing people as well. And you can do that for free. All you got to do is go to audibletrial.com/best. That's audibletrial.com/best. And then you can check out their service for 30 days for free. And included in that is one free audiobook download. So you could download any one of those four, listen to it, and then let me know if it's any good. You can do that by sending me a tweet at Richard_Parr. If you want to get that free 30-day trial of Audible, just go to audibletrial.com/best. All right, let's do it. Let's listen from the very best. It's time to speak to Katerina Stefanidi.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Katerina Stefanidi, welcome to the Best in the World with Richard Parr. Pole vault Olympic champion from the Rio Olympics. So great to have you on the program. Lots to cover on today's podcast, but I've got to start with something that I read just before we did this interview. And of course, pole vault, you're climbing lots of meters, but I read the other day that you are scared of heights. Is this true?
Yeah, it's true. I will say that my husband has been trying to push my limits a little bit more. I mean, I'm not deathly scared of heights. It's certain situations where I can actually hurt myself. Well, okay. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because even inside buildings, I get pretty scared. What happens is I get dizzy, and I'm sure a lot of people get dizzy, but they don't freak out. But I get dizzy and then freak out. So then I'm worried that I'm going to fall. So it is true, but my husband and I are flipping our house actually, so there's ladders and scaffolding everywhere, and at first I would go up to maybe the third step of the ladder, and I have been really working up to like the fifth and sixth step, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it's a big step for me. And so, like I said, he's been definitely pushing my limits, but there's definitely a fear of heights there.
So how can you do the pole vault? Surely that's the scariest. That's a lot more scary to me than it would be climbing a ladder, no?
Yeah, but you know what I think? I started very young. I started at 10 years old, and I mean, pole vaulting is second nature to me. In fact, my husband, who also coaches me now, he always jokes that I run better with a pole in my hands than without. So I think it's just such a natural thing for me to do, and I feel so controlled doing it that I don't get scared. Of course, I think also I don't have time to get scared. By the time we go up in the air, we're landing on the pit. So I think that helps a little bit too. But I do feel a lot more in control when I'm pole vaulting than when I'm up on a ladder, and for some reason I think I'm going to slip and fall off.
And at least with pole vaulting, you've got those mats at the bottom. I guess with a ladder, you've only got the hard floor. So
that is true. That is true.
So you mentioned that your husband is also your coach. How does that dynamic work for you both?
It has turned out really good. We started it the year before Rio, so our first year working together was the Olympic year. We were teammates before, and I mean, as teammates, you always talk to each other and help each other, and I can always tell whatever he was telling me always helped more than whatever any coach or anybody else will tell me. So I knew that from a technical background, we were very similar. And he grew up with a coach that had like what we call in the pole vault the Petrov model or the Russian model maybe of technique. And I grew up the exact same way too. So we definitely had a very similar technical background. And then he has studied sports science, so everything we did in training was based on like scientific papers and like things that made a lot more sense. Not just like, oh, I'm a coach and I have experience and this works, but it made me trust what we were doing in training a lot more. So I think that helped a lot. But in terms of the husband and wife and coach and athlete relationship, it has been no problem. In fact, I think that it's actually good for our relationship because when we get angry at each other, it's more of like a coach athlete being angry at each other. And then we go in the car to go back home and we're back to our normal and we forget about pole vault.
Okay, that's good. So you've been working with him now in the coach way since 2015, and of course 2016 was an amazing year for you, obviously becoming an Olympic champion. Was there anything in particular that you guys did to change your training routine, which you think helped improve your success in 2016?
Yes, I think so. So again, like I said, I grew up in a little bit different environment where we focused a lot more on what I would say quality. So technique work and mechanics and all that. And when I came to the US, we kind of lost focus a little bit. And I mean, I think it was good for me to kind of see a different perspective where it was more about lifting and training hard and sprinting hard. But I don't think I'm that kind of athlete. I think the reason I'm good at what I do is because I'm a good pole vaulter, not necessarily a great athlete. So when I started working with Michigan, we kind of went back to the base. Like we put more focus on being a good pole vaulter, on jumping technically correct. So I think that made me again trust it more, and it kind of felt more familiar. That's what I did growing up, and when I had most of my success growing up. So I think that helped a lot. But like I said again, with Mitch, we did a lot of our training made a lot more sense in terms of peaking at the right time. And I will say I did a lot less lifting, a lot less heavy running. And I mean, if you see pole vault, it's an explosive event, right? We don't want to be weightlifters and we don't want to be distance runners. We want to be able to run fast for 20 or 30 meters. And a lot of the training I had done before, since I moved in the US, didn't make 100% sense in terms of what are we trying to accomplish in our event. So I would say two things. First of all, like I said, the technique. We focused a lot more on the technique again, and I feel like I started pole vaulting better and being more efficient with it. And in terms of the physical part of it, we changed some things, did a lot more explosive and short and not quite as heavy lifting and running. And I think that helped me a lot, and it kept me healthier as well.
And one of the other things I read as far as the actual events is that you changed your philosophy towards qualifiers. Could you just explain what you did there?
Yeah, so I mean, I have generally been a pretty good championship athlete since I was young. I was competitive. I always did pretty good, but I always had a little bit of trouble with qualifying rounds. For us, it's prelims, so we all go in. There is usually qualifying standard, but very rarely do we have to jump that high. So pretty much we keep jumping until there is 12 girls left. And a lot of the time it will be a pretty low high for me. So I would go into the competition thinking, oh, this is pretty easy. I only have to jump a foot under my, 30 centimeters under my best. So it didn't sound that hard, but that attitude going in, I was not prepared to have a real competition. And I have had some bad prelims. Most of the time it turned out okay, where I figured it out and still qualified. A couple of times I didn't. So one of the things we changed was going into the prelim as if it's the final. So in most of my meets last year, I was starting at about a height of 4.60 meters. And what a lot of people, I think, do wrong is they go into the prelim starting at 4.30 meters. And I used to do the same thing because you're thinking, oh, it's the prelim, it's easier. But I think you need to see it as just any other competition. So that's kind of what we did last year. And I think it worked out because it might be a little easier going into the prelim and having to jump a little lower, but pole vault is not like the 100 meters where you can just run a little slower. We can't just run a little slower. We still have to run at the same speed, take off, bend the pole, go upside down. So you can't do a half pole vault. So I think it helped a lot going into the prelims with that attitude that is another meet, and I'm still trying to jump as high as I can, even though most likely they will stop us around 450 or 460.
Well, sounds like all or nothing there.
Yeah.
So what about when you're training? Because a few of the athletes we've had on this program before, in particular the one which comes to mind is Brian Clay, the decathlon champion from 2008. He said that he would often train even harder and compete even harder in training than he would at meets. Now, when you have that mindset as I need to do my best in the qualifiers and the prelims, is that something you can also do in training, or do you need to be a little bit more careful in training?
I will definitely say I'm quite the opposite of that. I don't know if you've ever talked to Kim Collins, but I do really love what he says. And one of his Spikes interviews, actually, he said that the biggest mistake people do is they train too hard. And he's 40 years old now and he's still competing at a high level. And I truly believe what he says. You cannot train at 100% every day. Your body will, maybe for a few years, maybe you can, but you will not have a long career. And I think I came from a background like that. Like I said, we focused a lot more on quality and jumping correctly, and I didn't have to run or lift too much. As long as I can pole vault correctly, it was okay. I think now I have found a balance between what I would call the European way of training and the American way of training. But I don't think you need to go all out in terms of effort at practice. So we train hard, and every time I'm jumping, I'm trying really hard to get the perfect jump. But I'm not necessarily running all out, or most of the time you're also tired from the training of the day before. So I wouldn't say that. I would say that at practice, I try to get the right motions, the right technique. And when the competition time comes and you're starting to rest a little bit from the training, I think it all comes together.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we need to get Kim Collins on the show at some point in the future. It'd be great to learn from him.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
More from Katerina in just a moment, but I wanted to just remind you that the Best in the World with Richard Parr is now part of the Sportacino network. We've also got a wrestling videocast going on every Wednesday at 3 p.m. British Standard Time. We'll also be returning with a new football show when the season returns in August. Do not miss that. And to make sure you do not miss it, please go and like the Facebook page, facebook.com/Sportacino. Also subscribe to us on YouTube, and also just check out the website, sportacino.com. It's got all of our previous episodes, all of our different shows, our current wrestling show, and of course, the Best in the World with Richard Parr. Talking about the best in the world, let's return to my conversation with Katerina Stefanidi, the Olympic pole vault champion.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
What about your diet? What's that like? What are you normally eating?
That has been a big challenge for me throughout my career. I started gaining some weight around 16, 17 years old, which is pretty normal, I think, for a female athlete. But my coach and dad and father kind of pushed me a lot with many dietitians. So, of course, I ended up gaining even more weight. So I have struggled a lot with it. But the last few years, I have realized that, I mean, you know, what everybody says is it's a lifestyle change. You can't just try to diet for a couple of months and then go back to eating bad. And to make a lifestyle change, you have to do it very slowly. So for me, I slowly started changing my breakfast, for example. I used to eat cereal every day. I started eating 1 day cereal, 1 day oatmeal, then maybe 2 days oatmeal, 1 day cereal. And I slowly maybe transitioned into only eating oatmeal for breakfast and maybe sometimes some mornings eggs. So it took me months to just switch my breakfast. But I think to make it a lifestyle change, you need to take it slow like that. And after we changed my breakfast, we started adding a couple more meals in my day because I used to eat 3 big meals, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We started adding some smaller meals in between so that my bigger meals are not quite as big. So that took a long time as well. And then I would say the biggest change was taking the carbs out of dinner. So I would say 5 out of 7 days a week, we eat some sort of a protein and salad for dinner without any carbs. The other 2 days, I would say we may add some carbs, but again, nothing too crazy. So for me, the biggest change was adding more meals so that I'm not getting too hungry throughout the day and then wanting a really big meal, and then cutting out the carbs at night and adding more carbs in the morning. I felt better at practice, having more energy, eating oatmeal in the morning instead of cereal.
Yeah, I'm completely with you about it takes time to kind of wean yourself off things. It took me 2 years to get off sugar in my tea. I went 1 year 2 teaspoons, then the next year 1 teaspoon, then finally went to no teaspoons. And as I'm drinking my tea now, I'm really enjoying it. You mentioned your father there. He was originally your coach. But of course, he was a Greek champion, and your mother was also a Greek champion, triple jump and sprinting. Were you just brought up in an athletic household? Was it sports and athletics all the time?
Yes, very much. Growing up, even my grandma, who actually had not really done any sports when she was younger, growing up, she started running the marathon. So, I mean, it was a little crazy. And my dad also very competitive. I would say between my dad and my mom, he was a little more talented. They were both on the Greek national team, but I think he had maybe higher dreams. But they found this problem with his heart when he was about 20 and they made him stop. But he actually ended up going on to play professional basketball in Greece. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, definitely lots of sports in my family. I remember from a very young age we would go to the beach in the summer, and my dad would draw lines in the sand and make me sprint in between and long jump, and you know, of course, you're not just running. Like, there's timing involved. There is how far did you jump. So it was always like that. And then my dad's side of the family, they had kids our age, so we would always compete and play soccer. We definitely did lots of sports, but I will say track was pretty big. And my dad was actually not my coach, but he did push me towards track from a very young age. I would say 2nd or 3rd grade, he started taking me to we call them mini competitions. There's just little kids, and they split us up by what grade we're in, and we compete. And I would say about 2nd or 3rd grade, I started going to these, and I was really fast. I would say that was my natural talent. So he will make me sprint and long jump mainly. A couple of times I had to run 1,000 meters, and it was the worst decision I've ever made. But other than that, I sprinted and long jumped. And I remember one particular competition actually that the guys went first, all the heats of the guys went first, and then we went, and I was, I think, in the last heat of the girls because of my personal best, and we finished, and I heard one of the officials say, oh my God, that girl ran faster than the guys. So I definitely had some speed and explosiveness in me. And then in 2000, when women's pole vault was in the Olympics for the first time, it was when we kind of decided to try it out.
Yeah, and then of course you had the Olympics in Athens as well. Did that really inspire you, or were you already at that point where I'm taking this seriously? I want to be there one day.
You know, a little bit of both. I had a lot of success young. At 11, I broke the 11-year-old age group record. At 12, I broke the 12-year-old age group record. So at 14, I was actually pretty close. I was only, I think, 15 centimeters from qualifying for the Athens Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was hoping that maybe because I was so young and the Olympics were in Greece, they would let me compete. But I think a little bit of both. By that point, I was already jumping so high for my age that it was definitely a dream that I will go to the Olympics and try to win the Olympics. But to have the Olympics in Athens, it was one of the coolest experiences. There were people from everywhere, and downtown Athens was crazy every day. It was a lot of fun.
I know my first Olympics just watching was London, and it became a different place. It was like Disneyland. Everyone was friendly to each other. It was amazing.
It really was cool. And when you compete in the Olympics, it's not that cool because you don't get to go out and walk around and see all the fun. You're trying to be more serious. So for me, Athens was the most fun Olympics.
I'm sure. What do you do when you're at the Olympics? Are you in the Olympic Village, or do you stay away from it? How do you base yourself during the games?
Well, so in London, it was a great experience being in the village and kind of seeing how everything works. So when we were trying to prepare for Rio, I knew that I didn't want to go there too early because it is not. I mean, there's no bad conditions in the village, but it's difficult. It's not your bed, it's not your pillow. The food you have to realize they're cooking for 8,000 people. So of course the food is not the greatest. So I knew I didn't want to be there for too long before I had to compete. So I think we got there 6 days before the prelims, which I think it was perfect timing. It wasn't too long, but we had enough time to kind of figure out the stadiums and the bus system and everything. I don't know. I think a little bit, it's so different. London was such a different experience than Rio, and everything was, I don't want to say more organized, but there was definitely a little bit more order in it. and Rio was a little bit more relaxed. And I think each one had pros and cons. I mean, in Rio, we literally went upstairs to the third floor of the stadium and found suites that families book, and they were empty, and we just sat in a suite and watched the meet from the suite.
Nice.
In London, we could not even move one seat down from where we're supposed to sit. So pros and cons with everything.
Was there anything in particular you got to see at Rio that you enjoyed?
We went to the track every day. I love track and field. I've grown up around it, so the only thing I missed actually was the men's pole vault because they were the night before our morning prelim. So that was the only night I didn't go to the track in Rio. But we didn't really get to see any other sports, unfortunately.
Fantastic. Now, what is your pre-competition routine? Do you have any rituals or anything like that?
Not really. I think in professional sports, at least in track and field, and the way we travel and the way we compete, I think you need to be quite flexible. I think it's good to have a routine, but a lot of times, you miss your flight, you get there a little later, and maybe you don't have enough time to do what you usually do. So I think it's good to be flexible. And every year it changes a little bit. Like a couple of years ago, I would train the day before the meet. I felt like I was activating my muscles, and last year I would say we mostly rested the day before the meet. And I don't know, I think I'm matured enough into the sport now where I realize that every competition I have, it's an opportunity and it's a chance to compete, and I never know how many more chances I'll have to compete. So every time I go in and I have fun, and I don't know. I don't really stress about it. A lot of times I do a different warm up depending on the temperature. We were in Doha a couple of weeks ago, so of course you can't do the same warm up in Doha as you are going to do in London. So I think I would say my ritual is being flexible, seeing the conditions, seeing what's going on. Sometimes you might be hurting, so you might have to change a little bit your warm up. So I think for me it has been very important to be able to be flexible and still be warmed up mentally and physically to start jumping in the competition.
Yeah, I know Doha very well, having lived there for 6 years, covering the Diamond League as well. It can be. I wore a suit one year. It was very wet by the end of it. Difficult conditions, but things are going. Did you win that event? Did I read, Katerina?
Yes.
At the Diamond League. So you're winning again. I think you've already won. Was it the European Indoors this year?
Yeah, correct.
So you're on quite the winning streak. How confident are you feeling for the World Championships later this year?
Training, I would say that this year has gone better than ever. We learned a lot last year with changing my training and, like I said, lifting a little less, doing more explosive stuff. And we've changed it a little more this year again. And I would say you write a plan at the beginning of the year and you never know how much of the plan you will do. And I would say last year we did probably 85%, and this year we did closer to 95% of our plan, which, it's very good for an athlete. I'm 27, I'm not 20 anymore where I can just do everything that we write down. So it's actually pretty successful to be able to do 95% of what we wanted to do. And it has gone better than ever. I have been healthier than ever. Technique and training and everything, it really is going better than ever. So we definitely have high expectations and high goals. And like you said, I started the outdoor season with a win in Doha, and it was a 20 centimeter season opener best for me. So we definitely started on a good note. London is a big goal because it's the only big championship I don't have a medal in. So I will say that I would like to win, but any medal will be a success for me. Again, I have medals at European indoor and outdoor and indoor world championships and the Olympics. So that's the one I'm missing right now. So I would say that I would be happy with any medal, but my training right now is going so good, and we're even kind of talking about, world record attempts. So I'm excited for the season to begin. Doha is a little bit early. We almost have a month in between Doha and the next meet. So I'm excited for the real season to begin.
I'm finding you fascinating, Katerina, mainly because you seem so relaxed, but you almost seem so relaxed because all your ducks are in a row, so to speak. Everything's already in place. How much of that has to do, because of course I've read that you studied psychology at Stanford and also went to ASU as well. How difficult was it for you to be juggling studying a degree at Stanford but also trying to compete and train in pole vault?
The US universities make it so that you can combine athletics and your studies very well, especially while you're competing for the university. So at Stanford, I had it pretty easy. Of course, the level of studies was hard, and luckily I was always a good student, so I didn't really have too many issues with that. I've pole vaulted since I was 10, so I've had to learn to organize my time pretty well. It got a little harder when I went on to ASU because I was not competing for the university anymore. So they didn't really allow me to train in their track, so I had to drive further away. Yeah, I know. So I had to drive. I moved to Arizona to train with Nick Heisong, the Olympic champion in 2000, and he has his own club. So some of the days I would drive there anyways because he will be there. But the rest of the time where I just had to do a workout, sometimes they will allow me to train at ASU. Sometimes I had to drive to a high school nearby. So it was a little harder time-wise. But I don't know, it worked out. And for me, I think school was a great distraction. I think it's very important to be a well-rounded person. And I think when you're only doing track, or I mean, it could be anything, it can be music, it can be drawing, it can be anything. I think you kind of get obsessed about it, and one meet goes wrong and then you're freaking out about what the rest of the season or your rest of your life is going to be like. So I think for a while it was good for me that I had that other option, that what, if pole vaulting doesn't go well, I'm still studying, I have good degrees, and I enjoyed it a lot. I will say that it was a big change for me to not do school. I stopped school the year before the Olympics. I decided that it would be a good idea to try to only focus on pole vault for a year. And it was a big change, because it felt like, what is going to happen if pole vaulting doesn't go well this year? But I think because of that kind of pressure I put on myself is why I ended up doing better at the end.
What are your distractions now? I know you've got your house. What else do you do to kind of forget about pole vault for a little bit?
The house, the house has been a big project. My husband actually flipped houses while we were in Phoenix too, but when we moved here, we found this house that was a great opportunity for flipping and selling and making some profit eventually. But we knew we would be doing everything ourselves, and it was a big house, so maybe we started a little too big. But I mean, everything is going well. It's just, we leave for a month and a half in the indoor season and 3 months over the summer, so we really don't have that much time to work on it. So the house is what we work on all day long, and then at the end, when we're done with what we want to do, we go to practice.
Well, I know you're a busy lady with preparations for the World Championships, a house to flip and everything, so we'll wrap it up here. I did have a lot more questions, but I know you're busy, but thank you so much for being on the programme. Just before we go, maybe you can tell us where we can find you on social media and anything like that, so we can continue to follow your journey, please, Katerina.
Yeah, so on Instagram, my name is ivolcat. I know that you can just search somebody's name, but it's hard with my name because the full name is Katerini. I think if you just search Katerina Stefanidi, the Instagram name is ivolcat. Twitter will be Cat Stefanidi, and then Facebook, my official page will be Katerina Stefanidi. I try to post on all three, mostly the same things, sometimes a little different. So I think if you follow me on any of them, you'll kind of know what I'm up to.
Yeah, looking after social media sometimes can be a full-time job in itself. Katerina, thank you so much for that. I'll make sure that we put the correct links on our notes page when this podcast goes out. Thank you for being on the programme, and thank you for being the best in the world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Yes, I really enjoyed that conversation with Katerina. I think you'll all agree that she's got a very bubbly spirit, and I wish her well at the World's Championships later this year. If you're interested in track and field, maybe you want to go back and listen to my conversation only a few weeks ago with Michelle Carter, the current Olympic shot put champion. We also spoke to Jeff Henderson, the men's Olympic long jump champion, all winners from the Rio Games. Plus, we've also spoken to Liz McColgan, the former 10,000 metres runner. Lots to learn from all of those great Olympians. We've also had many conversations with different Olympic champions. Maybe you want to hear from Matteo Tagliariol, the Olympic fencing champion. Maybe you also want to listen to the Olympic sailing champion, Anna Tunnicliffe. She's been on the programme as well. Lots of great content. Go and listen to them on iTunes. Please subscribe to The Best in the World with Rich Parr on iTunes and give us a rating and review. That would really help our programme. Alright, that's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another Olympic champion, world record holder, or world number one that we can learn from to help our athletic endeavours or just our everyday lives. I've been Richard Parr. Have a wonderful week.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.